The Kacchan-Bullsh Detector by mentallypapaya. Summary. "Give me back my fucking bag. There's nothing in it, and it's my fucking property," he hissed, before stomping and slumping back into his chair with a stony expression when Aizawa sent him a warning look in response. "I'm sure there's nothing, but I need to make sure before we can move on and I can start class," he placated, quickly unzipping the top and peering into the bag. The entire class, excluding Izuku and Katsuki, leaned forward slightly, eager to find out the cause of this entire mess. Aizawa froze, looking into the bag before he looked back up at the ceiling and letting out a long, hard breath. He blinked a few times, as if recollecting himself, before he tilted his head back downwards and at Katsuki, who was now staring very intensely at the desk in front of him. "Why?" was all Aizawa said, a lost expression on his face. Katsuki glared harder at the desk. It may have taken a long time, but Katsuki is finally starting to loosen up a bit and allow UA to see his more fun side. Izuku kind of wishes he wouldn't. Izuku's relationship with Katsuki was very complicated and confusing to think about. To everyone around them, it just seemed that Katsuki hated Izuku, and Izuku was too shy to do anything about it. But to the two themselves, it could never have been that simple. If you were to simply ask anyone in their class what the relationship between Izuku and Katsuki was, they would without a doubt say rivals, or maybe just Bakugo really hates Izuku. However, Izuku knew deep down that no matter what Katsuki said or how annoyed he acted, Katsuki would take a bullet for him if he needed to. The same way, Katsuki knew that Izuku would die for him. Inko once had described them as aggressive cousins, in the way that it made it look like there was nothing but hatred there, but no matter what, they would still deep down consider each other family. Nothing could erase the many years they had spent around each other. The bond of two childhood friends could never be completely broken. As proven in the way that the second Izuku walked into class one morning, he could sense something was off. "Morning, Kacchan." "Fuck off, Deku." It was a normal enough response from him, but Izuku still paused from where he was walking past Kacchan's seat, taking a step back to get a better look at him. The thing about Katsuki was that he was aggressive in everything he did. Everything. Because of this, Izuku had been forced to learn a long time ago that if Katsuki decided to do something stupid, he did something aggressively stupid. Spending so much time around the blonde caused Izuku to develop what he called his Kacchan-Bullsh sensor, just to survive his antics, and although he wasn't sure why, one thing he did know about that was something had just set the sensor off. Big time. You good, Izuku?" Uraka asked hesitantly, causing the rest of the class to notice his intense staring. Katsuki looked back up at him, a sneer plastered on his face. "The fuck are you looking at, dipshit? Fuck off," he snapped. Izuku continued to stare at him. "What did you do?" The rest of the class started to glance at each other in varying levels of confusion, not used to such a stony, confident tone coming from somebody like Izuku. Katsuki, however, didn't react, having grown up with this voice being directed towards him many a time, and he just glared back stubbornly, not even bothering to answer him. "You did something. What was it?" Izuku continued, narrowing his eyes. There was something in the way that Katsuki was sat, something in the satisfied glint hidden in his eyes. He'd done something. Izuku didn't know what, but he knows his best friend, and he knows when he's done something stupid. "What are you talking about?" Kirishima laughed, confused, glancing at his other friends warily. When both Izuku and Katsuki simply ignored him, continuing their staring contest silently. "What's happening right now?" Ashido whispered. "I don't know. They've never acted like this before," Kaminari whispered back. They were interrupted by Aizawa finally emerging from his sleeping bag, ready to start the class. He noticed Izuku not yet sat and sighed tiredly, evidently already feeling done for the day. "Problem children, what are you doing?" he asked in a bored tone. Izuku finally broke his gaze away to turn towards his teacher, lifting up a hand to point at Katsuki. "Kacchan's done something," he declares matter-of-factly, as if that information was in any way useful. "Fuck you! I did nothing!" Katsuki slammed his hands down onto the desk defiantly, leaning forward to direct his glare onto Aizawa, who sighed again in obvious exhaustion. The rest of the class ping-ponged their heads between them, watching the interaction silently. Bakugo language. "Midoriya, what did Bakugo do?" Aizawa finally asked, daring to entertain him for a moment. Izuku snapped his head back around to glare at Katsuki. "I don't know yet," he said confidently, jabbing his finger towards him again to reiterate. "But it's something." Aizawa slowly lifted his head to gaze upwards, as if praying for help, or a raise, because he definitely felt he deserved one. Izuku, feeling that Aizawa was not helping, abandoned his attempt to gather support in favor of refocusing all of his attention on meticulously scanning Katsuki, who, in turn, silently lifted both hands toward him, middle fingers raised spitefully. Izuku ignored this, thoroughly used to Katsuki's colorful language and actions, and allowed his Kacchan-Bullsh sensor to guide him. He leaned forward slightly, aligning his body towards Katsuki, and zeroed in triumphantly when he noticed Katsuki shift one of his feet towards his backpack, which was laying on the floor next to him. Bingo. "You didn't do anything?" he checked, raising his eyebrows disbelievingly. "Fuck you," was Katsuki's helpful response. "Then let me look in your bag," he responded, shrugging casually. Katsuki froze, and Izuku leant back a little, folding his arms in victory. Aizawa, noticing this, walked a little closer, causing Katsuki to put himself on guard even more, and he leant down to snatch his backpack from off the ground, clutching it to his chest protectively. "Yeah, not suspicious at all. Thank you, Kacchan-Bullsh sensor. You've done it again." "You touch my bag and I'll melt your fucking face off," Katsuki threatened, holding the bag securely, but also gently, as if he was protecting whatever was inside. Izuku was starting to get the idea of what Katsuki had done, going off on one of the things he used to do a lot in middle school. He groaned into his hands tiredly. "Wait, is there actually something in there?" Kirishima asked in surprise, eyes widening as he and the rest of the class suddenly became way more invested in the situation. Clearly, none of his classmates have had as much faith in Izuku's Kacchan wrangling abilities as they should, considering they're all aware the two grew up together. "No, shut the fuck up," Katsuki lied boldly. "Kacchan, I swear to God, if you've got another family of squirrels in your fucking backpack." Aizawa's head snapped towards him as Katsuki curled his arms around the bag tighter, defensive eyes bouncing around the room as if looking for an escape. "I'm sorry," Asui interrupted, holding up a finger. "If he has a what?" "Yeah, I'm also stuck on that part," Kaminari added, nodding, while Todoroki stared straight ahead, mouthing, "Another," to himself in obvious bafflement. "He did it a few times in middle school. I don't know why, they just seemed to flock to him," Izuku quickly tried to explain, all too aware of the way Katsuki was eyeing up the window. "It was kind of normal back at Aldera. Our old teacher once sent him into the classroom ceiling when she thought she could hear rats up there," he added, quieter. "I think animals just like him. He came back down with 2 mice and a budgie on his shoulders." "Bakubro?" Kirishima stared at Katsuki incredulously. "What even are you?" "Oh my god," Ashido half whispered, glee in her eyes. "Blasty's a Disney princess!" Katsuki's head whipped over to glare at her, screaming at her that if she ever called him that again, he would murder her. He let go of the bag with one arm to let off a few angry explosions, and Aizawa quickly stepped forward to pluck the bag from his grip, stepping back and out of the way when he immediately sprung forward to try and capture it again. "Give me my fucking bag back! There's nothing in it and it's my fucking property!" he hissed, before stopping and slumping back into his chair with a stony expression when Aizawa sent him a warning look in response. "I'm sure there's nothing, but I need to make sure before we can move on and I start the class," he placated, quickly unzipping the top and peering into the bag. The entire class, excluding Izuku and Katsuki, leant forward slightly, eager to find out the cause of this entire mess. Aizawa froze, looking into the bag before looking back up at the ceiling and letting out a long, hard breath. He blinked a few times as if recollecting himself before he tilted his head back downwards and at Katsuki, who was now staring very intensely at the desk in front of him. "Why?" was all Aizawa said, a lost expression on his face. Katsuki glared harder at the desk. "They started following me. You can't keep them. They're mine. They needed a home. You cannot have pets in the dorms, Bakugo," Aizawa painstakingly explained, as if talking to a child. "Especially not a nest of snakes." "Oh, for fuck's sake, not another snake!" Izuku groaned again as the rest of the class reacted. "Oh, what now?" Jiro leaned as far away from Katsuki as possible, wariness painted across her face. The Baku squad's jaws dropped, evidently very much not used to their leader doing this sort of thing. "Please tell me there isn't actually a snake in this room," Uraka yelped, while sudden understanding flooded into Koda's expression. "That's what I was hearing," he muttered to himself. "I kept hearing a bunch of muffled, 'stay with the new masters,' but I just assumed it was coming from outside the window." He continued when Ida sent him a curious expression. Izuku rubbed his eyes, looking back at Katsuki, who finally lifted his head, staring back at him with a very unapologetic expression on his face. "I would understand if you had a single snake, but where did you get a nest from?" he questioned, ignoring the mutter of, "Oh, you would understand a single snake, would you?" being sarcastically commented from one of his other classmates. "I don't have to explain shit to you, you fucking snitch," Katsuki snapped petulantly. "You need to release them back into the wild," Aizawa dryly stated, gently placing the backpack onto the desk again. Izuku leaned in to take a look, and sure enough, nestled in between a bottle of water and an old shirt that Katsuki had obviously added for padding was a ball of about 4 small writhing snakes. Sensei?" Koda piped up, raising a hand hesitantly. "I don't think that will work. They seem pretty attached to Bakugo." Aizawa shut his eyes for a moment, muttering about how he definitely did not get paid enough for this. "Well, they can't stay on school grounds. It's a hazard." "I can handle them," Izuku offered, ignoring the deadly glare Katsuki sent his way. "Like I said, this has happened before. I have experience," he added, gritting his teeth and sending Katsuki an annoyed look. "They're my fucking snakes. You can't take them away from me," he grumbled. "Yeah, well, you said that about the hornet's nest you found when we were 8, but you still don't have that, either," Izuku snapped back. "I need coffee," Aizawa muttered to himself, rubbing his eyes and walking away immediately. "You can keep the snakes in your bag for the duration of this class, but the second the bell rings you're both taking those things as far away from here as possible. Am I clear?" he ordered, glaring pointedly at both Izuku and Katsuki. Izuku thought that was kind of unfair, as he didn't do anything. It was all Katsuki. He's had that thought many times over the years, funnily enough. Something about Aizawa's face told him that if he pointed that out, it wouldn't be very appreciated, though. Yes, Sensei." They both chorused, Izuku wincing as Katsuki immediately stomped on his foot as hard as possible, his eyes promising of more revenge to come later. Well, it's not like he wasn't expecting something like that. He rolled his eyes and slunk to his seat. Are we really just leaving a nest of snakes in the classroom right now?" Uraka asked frantically. Aizawa slumped behind his desk, leveling her with a tired look. "Do you have a better idea?" She did not. She kept sending concerned glances towards where Katsuki was sat as Koda tried to comfort her. "If it helps, they're pretty much completely relaxed as long as they aren't taken away from Bakugo." It did not seem to help. "Psst, hey, Midoriya." Kirishima leant around to whisper as Aizawa started teaching the rest of the class. Izuku looked at him questioningly, nodding at him to continue. "What happened to the hornet's nest?" Izuku gripped his pencil tighter, glaring at his notebook as he gritted out the answer. He threw it into a fucking cop car. Kirishima stared at him. Just in front of Izuku, Katsuki's shoulders shook from silent, repressed laughter. And just like he did every time that god-forsaken incident was brought up. "What the fuck?" Kirishima whispered. Izuku couldn't see, but he just knew that Kacchan had that stupid, sly grin on his face. He leaned forward and flicked the back of his head out of spite. Katsuki subtly flipped him off in response. Maybe his mom was right. Aggressive cousins indeed. The second class ended. Katsuki had grabbed his backpack and stormed out of the classroom, nobody daring to come close to him as he left. Izuku gave a polite smile to Aizawa before immediately rushing after him, a couple of his braver classmates following quickly. "Kacchan, come on, you can't keep them." Izuku tried to reason with him once he finally caught up with his explosive friend. "I'm telling Auntie Inko that you are the one who broke the TV," was his hissed response. "You snitch!" Izuku exclaimed, faltering when Katsuki glared at him pointedly. "Okay, fine, fair enough, but still. Where are they supposed to fucking go, Deku? They started following me for a reason," Katsuki complained, abruptly stopping in the middle of the corridor and turning to him, allowing Kirishima and Kaminari, the only members of their class with the guts to actually follow them, to finally catch up. "What about the animal house?" Izuku offered, running a hand through his hair as he tried to find a way to get both the snakes out of the school and not get his ass beat by his childhood friend. "What's the animal house?" Kaminari asked, as Katsuki stopped, a considering look in his eye. Thank fuck there was hope. "It's a center nearby where we used to go to school. It's kind of a rescue home for animals. A really nice lady works there. Used to take a lot of animals that Kacchan found," he exclaimed. "Apart from, I'm guessing, the hornet's nest?" Kirishima said sarcastically, raising a single eyebrow. Izuku glared at him, as Katsuki snorted. "No, not the hornet's nest, but she did take a bucket of frogs, and the injured birds, and the budgie, and all the mice and tarantulas. You could always go back to visit them, and she treated them all really nice, and they liked it there." Izuku desperately tried to convince Katsuki, ignoring their incredulous glances they were both being sent after that particular onslaught of information. "She even took care of that horse you found once," he added, making Kirishima choke on air. "The horse?" Kaminari checked, clearly not trusting his own hearing. "I can't believe this is real life," Kirishima said to himself, eyes wide. "It was more of a pony," Katsuki muttered, before staring at his backpack forlornly. "Fine," he relented, making Izuku sigh in relief, "but only if they like it there." "Thank you," Izuku emphasized, mentally patting himself on the shoulder. "You owe me, big time," Katsuki added, which Izuku did not agree with. But he wasn't going to open that can of worms until after the snakes had been taken far out of reach. He knew by now not to jinx himself. "Can we go during lunch? That way we won't miss any class," Kaminari offered, making Katsuki stare at him. "Who the fuck said you idiots could come?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "Bakubro, this is literally the best day of my life. I'm learning so much about you. There's no way we're not coming," Kirishima pointed out. Katsuki glared at him, making Izuku sigh. "That doesn't matter right now. Right now we need to figure out where to put the snakes until lunch," he said, changing the topic. "And don't say 'in your backpack,' because you know you can't have them on you during another class," he added, pointing a finger at Katsuki when he opened his mouth to give a suggestion. Katsuki slowly closed his mouth again, a pissed-off expression on his face. "Fine, I'll just put them in a drawer in my room till then, asshole. That's where I was going to keep them anyway." "If you had a place to keep them so close by, why didn't you just drop them off there this morning? Why take them to school?" Kaminari asked as they continued walking towards the dorms. Katsuki decidedly didn't respond, tilting his head upward stubbornly and walking a little faster. Izuku narrowed his eyes at him. "Kacchan?" "Nothing." "Kacchan!" Katsuki groaned, clenching his fists angrily before slumping and curling in on himself as he walked. "Copycat's scared of snakes," he finally murmured. "I was going to set them loose in the 1B classroom." Silence. Izuku turned to stare straight forward, a blank expression on his face. You know you can't do that, right? He finally checked, hearing Katsuki sigh in response. Yeah, I know, he said sorrowfully. Kirishima cleared his throat. Let's not be too hasty here, guys. You know, Monoma's really annoying. He gestured in front of him hopefully. We could still do that. Katsuki perked up, and Izuku and Kaminari immediately shook their heads. No, stop it, Kacchan, we can't, he said forcefully. Dude, you do realize how much trouble we would get in if we got caught, right? Aizawa literally knows that Bakugo has snakes. We would never get away with it, Kaminari said, waving his hands around frantically. Kirishima groaned, conceding to his point, and Katsuki huffed. You're all fun suckers, he decided. What the fuck happened to you? Where is that angry yelling boom boom man I spoke to yesterday? Kaminari immediately retorted. Katsuki glared at him ferociously before they reached the entrance to the dorms, and he left them waiting outside while he made the snakes comfortable. I can't believe we live together. I've still never seen the side of Bakubro. Why is he like that? Kirishima said, turning to Izuku with all the enthusiasm of a scientist who had just found a perfect specimen to study. Izuku should know. He looked at Katsuki the exact same way back when they were 5 and he had come around to his house with 5 different beetles crawling around in his hair, claiming that they followed him home the day before. I don't really know. I think it's the animals. They've always brought out the side of him. They, relax him or something? You should have seen him when we went to the petting zoo. It was chaos. That's amazing, Kirishima breathed. I always forget you grew up with him. Dude, you've never really acted like it before now, Kaminari observed, and Izuku shrugged. We do. People just don't really notice. It's kind of what we're used to, I guess. They stood in silence for a few more seconds before Katsuki emerged from the dorms, backpack now casually slung over his shoulder, a disheartened look on his face. Did you put the snakes in your room? Izuku checked. You're lucky I didn't put them in your bed, he hissed. Kaminari patted him on the back, feeling through the fabric of the bag before giving Izuku a grin and a thumbs up. All clear, don't feel any snakes. Whatever, let's just go to fucking class. Katsuki rolled his eyes before stomping off, the rest of the small group following suit. They only just made it to their next class in time, leaving the rest of their classmates no opportunity to ask about the results of the morning snake fiasco. And the 4 were gifted instead with constant curious and somewhat fearful glances sent towards them the entire time until class ended. Katsuki, being Katsuki, completely ignored all and any questions about the snakes, practically running away from the entire class and disappearing the second that he could. Izuku might have called him a coward for it, but he did have a bag of snakes with him earlier, so it didn't seem wise to antagonize him. Instead, he just shook his head as he watched him disappear down Yue's hallways. Izuku? Uraka asked, as the classroom door swung shut behind them. Yeah? Should you really let Bakugo run off on his own when he's got access to snakes? Kaminari laughed, patting her on the shoulder comfortingly. Don't worry, he got rid of them. Koda, hearing this, wandered over to the group, narrowing his eyes. He doesn't have them anymore? Nah, don't worry, dudes. Midoriya made him get rid of them. Kirishima grinned to the class, slapping Izuku on the back triumphantly. Are you sure? Izuku turned to look at Koda warily. Why? It's just, I could kinda still hear them, close by. Shit. Izuku froze, before snapping his head over to Kaminari. You said they weren't in the bag. They weren't, he didn't have them, he left them in the dorms till lunch, Kaminari responded, holding his hands up in defense. The group stood quietly for a few seconds, before Kirishima dared to break the silence. There's no way he still has the snakes, right? As if in answer, they heard a distant, terrified shriek echoing through the halls. Shit. He still has the fucking snakes? Izuku groaned, turning to track down where Katsuki had run off to, evidently so he could cause trouble. He should have known Katsuki had given up too quickly. Katsuki's the most stubborn person he'd ever met. Yue's caused him to let down his guard. Izuku had gotten rusty. He just hoped that it wouldn't turn out anything like the Hornet incident. The first clue that Katsuki had again done something very stupid and Kacchan-like was the fact that as they approached the cafeteria, they were greeted with the sight of Katsuki himself sprinting down the hall, looking very much like he was fleeing a crime scene. Izuku didn't even try to stop him. He just shook his head in pure disappointment and despair as Katsuki ran past them, ignoring his classmates' calls for him to stop completely. Bro, what did he do? Kaminari wondered as he stared off after him. Kirishima, to Izuku's immense exasperation, seemed to be excited about whatever had happened. He even went so far as to clap his hands together, grinning and craning his neck to try and spot the mess that was surely waiting for them at the lunch hall. Izuku was not looking forward to Kirishima being familiar with Katsuki's more feral side. He seemed way too much of an enabler so far, and he did not want to have to chase after both of them. "There's only one way to find out," Ashido said, somewhat uncertainly. They proceeded into the cafeteria with the careful hesitance of a baby lamb trying to learn how to skip for the first time. The sight they saw was just about the equivalent of an 11-year-old llama being violently bowled into that lamb just as it made its first step. The lunch hall was a mess, to put it lightly. There were at least 2 tables overturned, and about 15 different students had congregated fearfully on top of the non-overturned tables, huddling together like survivors of a shipwreck desperately trying to preserve body heat. There was also, for some reason, a very large scorch mark on one of the walls. In the middle of the chaos was one Monoma Neto, crouched on the floor, backed up against one of the said overturned tables, collapsing his arms around his legs. He had a terrified, far-away expression on his face, and looked to be about 2 seconds away from rocking back and forth like a traumatized child. "Oh, God, no," Izuku moaned to himself. "Oh, fuck yes," Kirishima whispered to himself in complete and utter glee. Ashido slapped him upside the head, and Izuku mentally thanked her, as they edged further into the room. "What happened?" he asked one of the congregated tabletop students, gesturing to just about everything in the room. "The blonde one, the one with the explosions," a girl replied. And Izuku genuinely couldn't tell if she was avoiding saying Katsuki's name because she didn't know it, or if she was afraid that using his name would summon him again. "We were just talking, we weren't doing anything wrong. He just came up to Monoma and grabbed him by the wrist and said something like, 'Copy this, fucker!' And then snakes started pouring out of his sleeve," another girl added, the rest of the students nodding in agreement to her story. "Monoma freaked out and accidentally copied his quirk, which is why there's that." A boy from atop a neighboring table assisted, gesturing to the massive scorch mark covering the wall in front of them. "Well, at least that's one thing that isn't completely Katsuki's fault." "Is Monoma okay?" Uraka checked, kneeling down in front of him and waving a hand in front of his face, getting no response whatsoever. He was really freaked out. Where did they come from? They were everywhere." As if trying to prove her point, Monoma chose that moment to utter out a broken whisper of sorrows, truly capturing the terror of the moment in every word. "Did any of you happen to get it on video?" Kirishima asked hopefully, managing to succeed in getting himself elbowed ferociously by Ashido. "I thought I told you." Izuku froze, and the entire group slowly rotated back to the entrance to see Aizawa glaring at them, evidently having been fetched by another student who was standing next to him. "To get those snakes away from school grounds." The rest of the class shoved Izuku forward, as if unanimously agreeing that since he was the self-appointed Kacchan Wrangler, this was his issue to deal with. Personally, Izuku thought that was bullshit. "If it makes you feel any better," he started off slowly, pointing to the scorch mark adorning the wall. "That wasn't Kacchan, that was Monoma's fault." Aizawa leveled a gaze at the almost catatonic Monoma. "Somehow, Midoriya, I don't think any of this was Monoma's choice," he observed evenly. "Yeah, okay, that was fair." Izuku nodded, conceding to his point and desperately trying to figure out his next move. Kirishima leant forward to whisper in his ear. What are we supposed to do now? Izuku shifted on his feet. The same thing we did after Kacchan threw that hornet's nest. He abruptly decided. We run. Can y'all give me anime recommendations? 'Cause I need something else to hyperfixate on. Thanks.